been making these ceramic objects in kind of workshop form with a couple of other makers. And I guess, in my studio in Chicago, and you can see a very beautiful baby blue one in the middle, which is the one that the Des Moines Art Center was able to purchase from my exhibition at Gagosian. But I thought I'd start with this image as a way of talking about the relationship between, let's say, making and the immaterial world, that I felt, pretty certain at the time that I was studying ceramics at Iowa State. I was also finishing an undergrad minor in religious studies, and that minor in religious studies was looking at kind of all religions. It was looking especially at Buddhism and traditional African religion, and reading the Torah, and kind of thinking about Old and New Testament as literature. But in all of that reading and all of that thinking, I felt very much like vessels. The metaphor of vessels was very important. So, I'm in my ceramic department in the basement of the design center at Iowa State, and learning to make vessels for which at Iowa State I was pretty bad. I wasn't the star potter by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. But I was down there trying to make these early vessels, and then I was also reflecting a lot on vesselhood and kind of people and the power that people had to make beautiful things, and how a person could in fact be a vessel, a kind of spiritual agent. And so I think that this exhibition with Gagosian was a lot about reflecting on the power of forms, right? And I was thinking a little bit about Tony Burke's, he has a book on Lucy Rhee. And when he reflects at one point on Lucy Rhee, he says, Lucy Rhee was, she made pots, and she only made pots. She was not in conversation with painting. She was not in conversation with sculpture, that she was kind of she was a potter's potter, and I love that idea. And it kind of gave me some encouragement when I was starting to think about this exhibition. We could go to the next slide, where I wanted to have a moment and really focus on my history with this material, and the fact that, in a way, ceramics for me, or the history of ceramics, the history of the plastic arts, that history is loaded with all kinds of intelligences. That is not just about the making of a ceramic vessel. There's obviously the history and the possibility of the science and the chemistry of it, the biological sciences and nature, and the ways in which, the atmosphere of a kiln is doing all these things that require that a little bit about physics and a little bit about thermodynamics. And I feel like that the totality of the practice, that was part of the thing that made me really excited to learn about ceramics, because it just felt like it could go on forever. But then I started reading the writings of a guy named Herbert Reed, who was he's a British writer. He was a poet, and for money he would write kind of critiques of contemporary art or modern art at the time. But it was Herbert Reed at his post at the Victoria and Albert Museum who talked a lot about how early ceramics, or British ceramics, or the history of ceramics is a history of form, and that because of its plasticity, in many ways, the ceramic studio preceded what we would come to understand as modernism. And that because of the plastic arts, or the things that potters do in their studio, or plasterers do in their studio, modelers do, that those ancient techniques, in fact, birthed what became modernism, and I think ultimately what led to anything we might call contemporary art. So for me, at least, this material functions as an origin story of my contemporary practice. And so not only personally, but in fact, the material itself, it was there for us in the beginning of many people's beginnings. And that for people who have gone to art school or know sculpture, in a way, you have to come through this material